Welcome to the second chapter of this course. In this session, we'll be looking at JavaScript. So in our earlier videos, we looked at HTML, we'll look at CSS, the various ways we can add CSS to an HTML document, and then how to build a login and then a sign-up page. So in this session, we will continue with JavaScript. So we are going to talk about what JavaScript is and then its role in the web development. Then we'll look at some of the basic syntax of the JavaScript. Then from there, we could discuss variables, the data types, and some of the operators we have in JavaScript. Okay, so to get started, I'll just create a folder here on my desktop. So I'll name this JavaScript lessons. So JS lessons. Then you can open this with your VS Code. All right, so inside here, I'm going to create my HTML file, so index.html, and then I'll create one style sheet, so style.css, and then a JavaScript file, main.js. All right, so we'll be working mostly from the JavaScript file because that's the main focus for this tutorial. So JavaScript, that's what we'll be working on mostly. So first, we'll just generate the HTML5 structure. So I'll just change the title to JS lessons and then link the style sheet like we used to do earlier. And then I'll link the JavaScript file. All right, so here there is something new here. So for you to add JavaScript to an HTML document, we need to use the script tag. Okay, so I'll explain this one later. Okay, so we could use the script tag, then we can link an external JavaScript file to our HTML document. So just like we used to create index.html, style.css. So in the same way, if we want to create JavaScript files, we use .js. So the file extension determines the type of file we are going to work with. All right. So in adding JavaScript, we could use an external file like we have for the style sheet. So you could create an external file and then you link it to your HTML document by using the source attribute within a script tag. Then you provide a path to your JavaScript file. Okay, so also you can just use the script tag, just like we have style in the CSS file. So we can, when you want to write CSS to, you can use the style and then you write any CSS property here, it's going to work. So same way you can use script and then you write any CSS, any JavaScript code within this, and then it's going to work for you. Okay, but if you choose to work in an external file, then you can add the src attributes and then provide a path to that JavaScript file. Okay, so with that being said, I'm going to work mostly from the external JavaScript file, but you can also follow along doing it within your HTML file. Okay, so here you can just create your JavaScript file and then you link it to your HTML document by using the src attribute within the script tag. Okay, so here let me just go live and then we can continue. Okay, so here, since we are now doing introduction to the JavaScript, we will not be displaying things on the HTML page here, but rather we'll be using something we call a console. So any browser you are using, you would have something we call a console. So you can use the console to be testing your JavaScript code. Okay. So to get access to your console, you can just right click anywhere in your browser and then you choose inspect. Okay, so once you choose inspect, if you're on Chrome, you are going to see console here. But if you don't see the console here, you can just click on this arrow and then you can see it within the options you have here. So depending on the browser you have, some you would have this panel on the bottom here. So depending on the browser you are using. So let me just clear out the console for now. So in your console, you wouldn't have any message here. Okay. So you are going to start from the basics of the JavaScript. So first we will need to understand some of the variables, some of the data types, and then how we work in JavaScript in general. That's to say the syntax of JavaScript. Okay. Okay, all right. So here to think of JavaScript, you can think of JavaScript as, let's say, something which gives an ability to an HTML document. Okay. So if you recall from our previous lessons, we said that HTML is the structure for your web page. So you can think of HTML as the skeleton of a human being. Okay. And then we have the CSS. So you can think of the CSS as the flesh. So the CSS adds beauty to your HTML document. Okay. So now you have your skeleton, which is the human, and then the CSS, which is the flesh, adding beauty to the body, or let me say the skeleton you've created. Okay. So now the ability for the skeleton to move, or let me say the person you have created to move, you need something to trigger it. Okay. So that's where JavaScript comes in. So JavaScript just gives your HTML the ability to perform an action. Okay. So mostly on your web pages, you could see when you click on a button, you get an alert. When you are scrolling, you'll be getting nice effect and other stuff. We use the JavaScript in playing such roles. All right, so now that we've gotten a broader view of how the JavaScript can be used in our web pages. Okay. So for now, we just understand that we use the JavaScript for adding behavior to our HTML document. All right. So next, we are going to look at the syntax of JavaScript, and then let me see how we can also create variables and other stuff in the JavaScript. Okay. So for the JavaScript, we have three ways of creating a variable. Okay. So first, to create a variable, you can use a keyword we call let. You can use var, and then you can use const to create your variable. All right. So here, let me just create some comment here. So to comment in JavaScript, we use 2/ to do that. Okay, but if you want to comment a block of code, then you can use a / asterisk, and then a /. So within here, you can write a block of comment. Okay, so remember, comments are not part of your code. Okay, they don't affect your code. So part of your code you want to take out while you are testing the codes, you can just comment those sections out. Okay. And then also you can use comment to give more details, or let me say explanation about your code. Okay, so that's going to guide you. So here, let me create a comment. Let me call it declaring variables in JavaScript. Okay, so to create a variable, you can use the let keyword. So you can say maybe let me increase the font size a bit. So you can say let full name should be equal to, say, Mike Smith. Okay. So when you create a variable using the let keyword, then you can assign a value to it. Then you end with a semicolon, but it doesn't complain most of the time, unlike the other programming languages. Okay. So you can say let full name should be equal to Mike Smith. Okay. And then you can use another keyword we call var. Okay. So you can see maybe var gender is equal to male. Okay. And then we have one last one, which is the const. So I can see const is active is equal to true. Okay, so you don't need to worry about this now. What we are looking at, or what we are focusing on now, is how we can create variables in the JavaScript. Okay, so now these have their own advantages and then the disadvantages, or let me say scopes where we can use them. Okay, so first we'll begin with the var keyword here. So the var keyword was another way of declaring variables in JavaScript. Okay, and then it is function scoped, so meaning that you can access the values within the function it is declared, or globally if the variable is created outside a function. Okay. So for instance, before you create a function, you can have a variable outside. You can access it within the function, and then you can also access the value after you run the function. That's the var. So the var allows you to get the value either within the function or globally. Depends on where you declared the variable. Okay. So the next one is the let. So the let one is used in the block scope. So it means that you can only use it within the scope where you created it. So for instance, if you create a function and then you have your variable inside, it means that the variable can be used within that scope. cannot be used outside the function. Okay. And then the last one is the const also. The const also is also block scoped. Okay, so it means that you can create it within a function. When you create it within a function, you can only access it within that function. You can't get the value outside. Okay. And then one disadvantage of using the const is that you cannot reassign a new value to const. Okay, like the name says, const means that it will never change. It is constant. Okay, so let me give a quick example here. So here we have full name. I can change the full name to something else. So I can say now full name should be equal to, let's say, John Doe. And then I can change the gender to female. We don't get any complaints. Okay, so now let me change the is active to false. Okay, so now let's go to our console. Okay, so we get an error here in our browser. Okay, so assignment to constant variable. Okay, so this simply means that you cannot reassign a value to a variable you have declared to be constant. So once you say something is constant, it means that that value will never change. Okay, so now if I'm to take this out and then go back to the browser, we don't have that error anymore. So keep that in mind. Anytime you declare a variable using the const keyword, means that that value you have assigned can never be changed. It is constant throughout. But when you use the var and then the let, you are allowed to change it. Okay, but with these two we have a difference. So the let one is limited in scope, means that it is block scoped. Okay, and then with the var keyword, that one we can get the value, or let me see, yes, the value globally, and then it's also function scope. Okay, so it means that when you create the variable outside the function, you can either access it within the function or globally. So those are the differences we have between the three ways we can create a variable in JavaScript. Okay, so next we'll move on to some of the basic data types we have in JavaScript. Okay, so I'm going to list all of them and then I'm going to look at the popularly used ones. All right, so I'm not going to comment this out, I'm just going to maintain them. Okay, so data types in JavaScript. Okay, so for data types in JavaScript, first we have number. Let me use the multi-line commenting here. So we have number, we have string. So I'm going to explain all of these. We have boolean, we have now, we have undefined, we have symbol, and we have big int. All right, so the data types in JavaScript can be grouped into two. Okay, so we have the ones we call primitive types, and then we have the non-primitive types. Okay, so the primitive types are the ones which were built into the language. Okay, but with the non-primitive types, those ones, we have the object, we have the arrays, we have the functions. Those ones are non-primitive. Okay, so here let me have for the second aspect. So we have the non-primitive types. Okay, so for this ones, we will look at object, we will look at arrays, and then we'll look at function. Okay, so let me label this also. So this will be the primitive types. So the primitive types, we are going to look at number, we'll look at string, we'll look at boolean, and then yeah, I think we'll look at these key ones, and then we'll move on to the non-primitive types. Okay, so we'll take them one after the other. So when we say data type, it means that the type of data you can store within a variable. Okay, so when you are creating a variable, you can specify the type of value you want to store the variable in, depending on the programming language you are using. Okay, but with JavaScript, it makes it easier that you don't need to specify the type of data you are storing in that variable. Okay, So the moment you assign a value to a variable, automatically it will identify itself based on the value you assigned to it. Okay, so let me do an example here. So let me create a variable called, let's say, age. Then let me say 50. Okay. So now let me hover on this so you can see it has a type of number. Okay, it has a type of number. So the moment you assign a value to a variable, automatically it identifies itself based on the value you assign to it. So let me change this to true. Let's say true, and then hover on it so you can see Boolean. So if I change this to, let's say, coffee, and then hover, you can see we have string. Okay, so JavaScript is a dynamically typed language, means that when you're creating a variable, you don't need to specify the data types. Once you assign a value to it, then it identifies itself based on the value you have assigned to it. So let me give a quick example of all the data types we have listed. Okay, so we have the number. So I can use the age, let me say 36, and then let me create a variable for using the string. So let me create a variable, let me say school, it's 10 o'clock, school name, say KBS school. So this is an example of the string. Okay, so strings in JavaScript, you can either use double quotes or you can use single quotes. So let me create another variable. Let me see, let's occupation, let me say student. So you can use single quotes also, it wouldn't complain. So you can use double quote or you can use single quotes when creating strings in JavaScript. Okay, so when I hover, you can see we have a string. And next we have the Boolean. So the Boolean will always return true or false. So any variable with this value, true or false, is called a Boolean. So when I assign false, you can see Boolean. If I assign true, you can see Boolean. So any variable with the value true or false is called a Boolean. Okay, so let's add one more then now. Okay, so let me just say car is equal to now. Okay, so this means that it is empty or it doesn't have any value at that moment, or you can also use the undefined. Okay, so these are the basic ways we can create a variable in JavaScript. So once you assign the values to it, then to identify itself based on the value you have assigned. Okay, so now that we have gotten a basic idea of how we can create variables in JavaScript, we can now use it in an example. Okay, so to use this in example, I'm going to start with the strings. Okay, so let me create another variable here. So let me call this, let's say, message. Now I want to write a message that my name is Kofi. I am a Ghanaian. All right, so now if I want to display this in the browser, for now we cannot. Okay, so like I said earlier, I would use the console to be testing our JavaScript code. So here, to display anything to your console, you can call the console and then use the built-in method called log to display the value. So I can see console log the message in this variable. So now we'll have this message in our console. Let me refresh. Okay, so we now have my name is Kofi. I am a Ghanaian. So that's one way we can work with strings. So strings are just sequence of characters. Okay, and then anything you put inside quotation marks by default will be treated as a string. Okay, so after displaying this to the console, we will have it here as this. Okay, but in the situation where you want to display a variable within the string, okay, we have something we call concatenation, which can allow us to add a variable and then strings together. So we'll look at that, and then in the next example we'll look at the string, or let me say template literals, where we can add the strings directly without using the concatenation approach. Okay, so I will give you both, and then you choose which best suits you. Okay, so now I want to create, or we can even use the full name variable here. Okay, so instead of saying my name is Kofi here, I will take the my name is Kofi out and then bring quotation mark, and then we use a plus to join the two strings together. So here, let me just go back to the console for you to see. So you can see my name is Nathan, I am a Ghanaian. Okay, so now to display a variable here, you can bring another plus and then you write the variable name. So my name is, then the full name we created on top, I am a Ghanaian. So now we have my name is John Doe, I am a Ghanaian, but we don't have any space between the is and then the John. So to do this, we can just create a space here. And then if you go back to your browser, you have my name is John Doe, I am a Ghanaian. Okay, so this one way we can use strings with variables when you're using the concatenation. You can join them together. Okay, so now let me create another variable. Let's say message2. So for this, we use the backticks. So backticks is just the key before one on your keyboard. Okay, so when you press this, you can now write your message. So my name is, okay, and anytime you're using the backticks, if you want to display a variable within your string, you just use your $sign and then you open a curly bracket. So within this, you can just write the variable name. I am a Ghanaian. Okay, so now let me console log the message2 also. So console.log message2. So we now have the same message. Okay, but I think the second one is much more easier to do, but I can still go with the first one. So why we have this is that at times you might have a lot of variables you would want to add within your string. Using the concatenation will be very, very difficult. So using the template literals is more easier in doing such operations. Okay. So strings also have some things we call methods. Okay, so the methods, will not be talking much about them. You can try your hands on them on your own, but I'm going to give you some of the few ones. Okay, so for instance, here we have the occupation. I can say console log occupation. So anything you want to display in the console, we use the console.log. So now we have occupation as student here. So the built-in methods in the string can convert the string to, let's say, uppercase. So I can say to uppercase. So when you use to uppercase, it's going to convert the whole string to uppercase for you. If you want to do lowercase, you can do to lowercase. It's going to convert all the strings to lowercase for you. So let me just change this one to all caps. So let me just say students, then go back. So here we have all to lowercase. So these are how we can apply some of the built-in string methods, but I'm not going to look much into that. Okay, so on your own, you can be trying your hands on the methods we have for strings in JavaScript. Okay, so next we are going to move on to the numbers, how we can work with numbers in JavaScript. So I'll just comment this out. So when you are working in your VS Code, you can just select a block of code, hold your control key and then /, or if you're on Mac, you can hold your command key and then a /. It's going to comment all of them for you. Okay, so because I don't have a comment here, that's why they are readjusting. Okay, but I wouldn't cause any error. Okay, so numbers are very straightforward, just like we have in mathematics. Okay, so I can have these two variables. Okay, so now I have num1 and then num2. I've created a variable num1 and then num2. Okay, so now let me console log these two numbers so you can see something different in our console. Let me do num1 plus num2. So here we have 40, but when we did this variable plus these strings, we got something different. Okay, so when you are working with numbers in JavaScript, it's going to sum the values for you, but when they are strings, it's going to perform the concatenation for you, unlike the other languages where they all have to be on the same data type. Okay, so for instance, you have a string here, the number you are trying to display should be converted to string like we'll do in Python. When you are working with JavaScript, it wouldn't complain much. Okay. So if they are both numbers, it's going to sum them for you. But if you have a number and a string, then it's going to perform the concatenation for you. So that's just a quick one. Okay. So now if I do num1 plus num2, it's going to give us 40. Okay. So that's 30 plus 10. Okay. So same way, if you want to do subtraction, so any arithmetic operation you want to perform, you can do. Okay. So let me do a quick one also here. So let me say num2 minus num1. Okay, that's 30 minus 10. If you want to do multiplication 2, you can do num1 times num2. So we use the asterisk for multiplication in programming. And then you can do console.log num1 divided by num2. So this for division. And then lastly, you can try the modulo. So console log num1 modulo num2. Okay, so for this we use the percentage sign for modulo, we use the / for division, asterisk for multiplication, subtraction we use the hyphen, and then we use the plus for addition. Okay, so that's the arithmetic operators we have in JavaScript. So if you want to perform any arithmetic operation, you would use these operators in doing that. Okay, so let me just have a quick comment here. So let me say arithmetic operators. So if you want to perform arithmetic operations, we use these operators, the plus, the minus, asterisk, / and then use the percentage sign for the modulo. You can also do exponentiation, okay, by using 2. So let me just say num2 raised to the power num1. Okay, so we use 2 asterisks when you want to do exponents. So let's say raised to the power, we use the 2 asterisks in doing that. So now we have the values here in our console. Okay, I think let me add some messages to it so that we can see it clearly. So just like we did earlier, we can add a string to a variable. So here let me just say addition. Okay, and then for the second one, subtraction. I hope the spelling is right. And then we'll have to use a plus to join it. And then we have multiplication, so multiplication. And then we have a division. We have modulo. And then the last one, exponentiation. Okay. All right, so now let's go to the console. So we can now have the result here clearly. Okay, so we have exponentiation, the modulo, the division, the multiplication, and then the addition. Which one is the none? Subtraction. Okay, so we have subtraction 20. Okay, so because we are doing subtraction and then adding it to subtraction and then the addition to the string, that's why we got the none. Okay, so for now you can just use a comma instead of using the plus to concatenate. Okay, so we now have a result here. So we have for the addition, we got 10, 30. So addition 10 and then 30. But here we got 10, 30. So that's because we have a string and then we have a number. So it's going to think they are all strings, so it's not going to perform the additions on them. Okay, so you can put this in parentheses. Okay, so that is going to separate this from this. Okay, so we now have 40. Or you can do this approach by using the comma. So let me undo it here. Okay, so you can use the comma so that you let it know that these are two different values. Okay, they are not the same. So I think using a parenthesis will be okay. So let me wrap this in parenthesis. And then let me do same for this also. Let me wrap that in parenthesis. Okay. So when you do it this way, we tell it that these are two separate values. They are not the same. Okay, so you have your result here. Okay, so I think these are some of the ways we can use the arithmetic operators in JavaScript. Okay, so let me just go to the top. So here we've talked about creating variables. We can use the let, we can use the var, then we can use the const. Okay, and anytime you use the let and the var, we can reassign a different value to the variables. But we saw when you create a variable using the const keyword, you cannot update it after you have created it. And then we talked about the data types. We said we have the primitive and then we have the non-primitive ones. Okay, so the primitive ones, we just looked at the number, the string, the boolean, the now undefined symbol, and then the being int. So the non-primitive type, we just listed these three. So object, arrays, and then functions. So these are the mostly used ones. And then here we looked at some ways we can create variables using the primitive types. Okay. And then we saw that anytime you assign a value to a variable, it identifies itself based on the value you have assigned to it. Unlike the other programming languages where you will need to specify the data type before you put the value or assign a value to it. Okay. So in JavaScript, it's very dynamic that when you assign a value to it, it's going to know that this is a number, this is a string, this is a boolean, this is now, depends on the value you have assigned to it. And then we started with strings where we can use concatenations to add a variable within the string. And then we also looked at the template literals where you can add the string and then the variables together without using the plus to join anything. So here we use the backticks in doing that. So you bring your $sign and then 2 curly brackets. So any variable you want to display within your string, you can just display it here. Or any operation, let's say 10 plus something, anything, you can do that within the 2 curly brackets here. And then we looked at some of the methods to, let me see how you can apply methods to strings in JavaScript. So when you write the name of the variable used to store that string, you can use the dot and then you get access to all the methods they have defined within the string class. And then here we have numbers. So numbers to, when the moment you assign a number to it, it knows that it's a number. Okay, so if I put quotations around a number, it's no longer a number but rather a string. So you have to keep that in mind. Even though we can see it is a number, it doesn't know it's a number because of the quotation marks. Okay, and then here we just looked at some of the arithmetic operators we have in the JavaScript. So we looked at addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, modulo, and then the exponentiation. Okay, so in the next example, or let me say in the next lesson, we are going to look at some of the comparison operators and then logical operators. Okay, and then from there we can go to the control structures where we'll look at if statements, we'll look at loops, and then we move on to functions, and then we will now look at how we can merge JavaScript with our HTML document. Okay, so for this lesson, if you have any comments or let me say any question, you can leave that in the comment section below, and then we are going to check that for you. All right, so see you in the next video.